This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube. And today I have a returning guest, two-time Survivor competitor, Bret Hart fan from WCW, former TNA wrestler, reality TV show star, and former personal assistant of WWE Hall of Famer Rowdy Roddy Piper. How are you doing today?
Wow. You forgot Survivor Hall of Famer and star of E's number one fall hit, House of Villains Season 1. But I will accept it all. Thank you for having me back. It is great to be in the two-timers club. It's much better than being called that in a relationship.
Yeah, I only found out about the Survivor Hall of Fame thing today. Is that a big deal? I'm not that familiar with Survivor.
I think there's only 13 of us. So, and there's been over 600 or 700 survivors at this point. So I guess it's pretty good.
Oh wow. So tell me the story about this Bret Hart WCW shirt to start things off.
I saw a Bret Hart WCW shirt and I was like, wow, that's got to be a collector's item. Who would buy that?
Yeah, I mean his run was far from illustrious there. You could say you had a better run in TNA than he had in WCW.
It's comparable. It's very comparable.
Speaking of that, I'm sure you've probably seen this, but I searched your name today and there is a video of Dutch Mantel burying you about your
Yes,
time. You want to address that? He was one of the writers at the time, I guess.
sure.
And yeah.
Yeah, I saw that, and it kind of hurt my feelings, to be honest with you, because the gist of what he said was I wouldn't agree to do stuff, and I'm just like, that's kind of the opposite of how my run went. So when I was initially contacted, Jeff Jarrett pitched. He was just like, I was like, hey, who do I manage? He's like, oh, you're just the bad guy. And I was like, okay. I was like, but I really don't wrestle, but I have, I have training, I can do stuff. And he was like, no, you got creative control over your character. You're gonna bump once a year. Your first bump won't be for 6 months, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, all this sounds great. I get there, they're like, man, you ain't gonna believe this. Access Hollywood's here, Inside Edition's here, Entertainment Tonight's here. He was like, you got to take a bump. And I was like, okay. And my contract had leaked out a couple of days prior on OneWrestling.com. So I called my manager. I'm just like, look, everyone here hates me. My contract leaked out. I'm making more money than anyone else here. I was like, they want me to take a bump. And she was like, well, what are you? I was just like, a spinning power bomb. And she's like, absolutely not. And I'm just like, well, I feel like this is going to be the longest 2 years of my life if I don't do this. So fuck it. I'm a team player. I want to show the locker room that I'm a team player. So I agreed. Night 1, took a spinning power bomb, got a legit concussion. Week 2, Brian Urlacher's there. They're like, hey, we got ESPN coverage. We're going to do a deal where Brian Urlacher presses you over his head, slams you to the floor. I'm like, okay, once again, 1 bump a year, won't be for 6 months. 2 weeks in, 2 bumps. Week 3, Simon Diamond stomped on my hand. Week 4 or 5, I take a Styles clash from AJ Styles. Where is this I'm not a team player shit come in?
Yeah, and I guess according to that clip with Dutch, his little geek podcasting buddy there said you were making 2,600 per appearance.
I don't think that it's so. My contract was for 300,000 for 2 years, and I don't know how many. I mean, they sent me money even if I showed up or not. But I feel like that works out to like what 8,500 an appearance, which I still don't know what the mass on a return, but it wasn't for lack of enthusiasm and go alongingness that I brought to the table.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like the typical attitude of some of those old school writers. Like he comes in with the attitude, you're a TV guy that doesn't want to be a wrestler, so we're not going to come up with anything good for you, and then we're going to blame it on you.
But I mean, but none of that makes sense. Like, if I'm not a team player, then I shoot down the power bomb. I shoot down the press slam to the floor. I shoot down the Styles clap. I shoot down all these things that I didn't, and I had creative control over my character. Why didn't I?
You did something with Lex Luger in TNA, didn't you?
Yeah. So right around the Styles Clash thing, somehow I was Abyss and I think Abyss and AJ Styles' manager somehow against Lex Luger and his opponent. I don't know. Like that day, Lex and I want to say Buff Bagwell arrived at the building and then took off. And then when they got back, they just threw their hands up. And then like somehow I think AJ and Abyss won. I was somehow their manager, but then I don't think I was brought back until Dusty got the book. So yeah, because they kept pitching me people to manage like every week. So I got there and I'm a bad guy and I'm not managing anyone according to Jeff. And then so then I was pitched. Pitched Abyss. I was pitched ODB. I was pitched Kid Cash. And then I believe Raven pitched for me to manage Raven. And I didn't understand any of it because I was just like, I feel like Abyss should be with Father James Mitchell. I didn't see where Raven needed someone to talk for him. I loved everyone that mentioned, but I didn't see and I was told to me that Kid Cash didn't want me to manage him, and then and I was just like if you want to go the direction of ODB, that's fine. Just make it make sense. So once again, I was open to everything that they threw out there, and at the same time they were asking me for ideas. And I was just like, well, the Miz has been contacted by WWE. They want him to go to Deep South Wrestling. Like, I think this guy can come here right now. And Jeff Jarrett's like, oh, Miz, that guy, he's mid card. You're main event. And then I remember going to the Contender finale, and Hulk Hogan's there, and he's like, how's the TNA run going, brother? And I was like, well, they want me to find someone to manage, and I always thought that was a work, except for like Paul Ellering. So I'm scouring the internet, and I was like, I like the Miz. He's like, oh, the Miz is mid card, brother. And I was like, geez, I was like, the Miz is my friend, because at that time, Miz was fresh off, Real World and the Challenge, and we were hanging out, weekly in Los Angeles. So I was just like, okay, well, if you guys are down on the Miz. And and by the second we were losing him to WWE to developmental for Deep South, I was like, there's this guy named Samoa Joe, and so I pitched Samoa Joe. And according to Joe, was on the Edge and Christian podcast, during the pandemic, and I guess they did reach out to Samoa Joe and pitch the idea that I bring him in as Reality Joe. See, for the record, I love Samoa Joe, is one of my favorite wrestlers, and at that time, I was just like, there's got to be a better name than Samoa Joe. I was completely wrong on. Samoa Joe works. It has worked. But at that time, I was like, isn't there a better? So I pitched the idea of, while I was in Fiji or some, whatever far away, Micronesia, I find Samoa Joe and I bring him back from my reality adventures. I make him Reality Joe. And, and he is my uncontrollable, Samoan savage. And basically, a slow burn, which, I would say, 6 to 8 months, which in TNA speak is, probably, 3 or 4 episodes. But Joe turns on me, and then Joe becomes, whatever Joe's name is or whatever. So, but I guess they did reach out to Joe, and I guess he thought about it. But at that time, he decided to stick with Ring of Honor.
You would have definitely made a good manager with all the heel heat you had, but I guess they just dropped the ball on you overall.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Who's to say what would have happened? Like, it's funny because I look back, I see what Jeff Jarrett has said with me on Conrad's podcast, and I heard what Dutch said, and I am a student of the game. I have done my homework. I was originally trained. When I started in the Carolinas, I went to Ken Spence's school. He's one of the assassins, and then I went to Axel Rotten later helped me, and then of course Roddy Piper. So it's not like, I was, like one of these, Hollywood people from like the Jersey Shore that, that watched, Hulk Hogan when they were 12. So like I knew my stuff. And as I said, I felt as though I was a team player. And, if you ask me questions, I'm happy to answer, and I'm happy to find workarounds to whatever is beneficial for the company. Like I kind of put myself out there where I was like company first, what works best for me second. And, and maybe that was my downfall.
Dutch mentioned you had no idea about wrestling protocol. Do you have any idea what he's talking about there?
I mean, I have an attitude, but I feel that there's a there's a jokiness to my attitude to where like, are I'm not really taking myself as seriously as I'm pretending to. And I could see some people not catching that. And that's it. And, I've dealt with that my entire life, especially in my professional life. So, but in my professional life, it's worked out more times than not. And maybe the guise was too complicated. I don't know. So, but it wasn't me attempting to be a dick or anything. It was if I went in and go, hey, I'm a 125-pound jobber, and like where's the allure? Like you build yourself up. Like Jimmy Hart used to say, if you look like you should be in the stands, you should be in the stands. So I was showing up in $2,500 custom tailored suits. I was leaving Los Angeles every week to fly to the Nashville fairgrounds. And my whole mindset for me personally was elevate them, not, hey, this place is a shithole. What the fuck am I doing in Nashville? That was never my mindset. And as I said, perception is one thing. And the people that chose to talk to me, to get to know me, like James Storm, the first night there, or before my first night, Dixie Carter paid for a limousine for me to go around with James Storm and go to bars and hand out tickets. And James Storm was like, fuck this guy. He's the Hollywood guy. I heard he's making a bunch of money. And I was just, and James Storm, gets the limousine. I'm just like, hey, drinks on me. I got Dixie's credit card. He was like, well, fuck. I mean, that ain't bad. and James and I talked. And then, when it was heading towards me and AJ, we're going to, kind of work a program, around each other's, universes. They had, I believe it was the cable, the NAPT thing or whatever, the cable thing in LA. They flew AJ out there to Los Angeles, and we hung out for a week and just talked just psychologies and our wrestling beliefs. And I had some of the best conversations about professional wrestling that I've ever had. And AJ was just like, holy shit, like we see, he's like, personally, we are extremely different, but when it comes to wrestling, we have very similar mindsets.
And as far as how Dixie treated you, how did you find her overall? And do you think there was any truth to those rumors that she may have been with some of the guys?
I heard the rumors. I feel that, I mean, I could be wrong. I feel that was jealousy of the boys wishing it were true. So I never experienced that. We were always close, good friends. And she treated me as an equal and as a friend and as an employee. But I never saw advancement. Never saw I would, more times than not, I would go out with Dixie and others afterwards, and I never saw anything like that. Did I hear the rumors? Yes, but I think that was the boys hoping to wish that into existence.
Yeah, and I don't blame them for that. She was a fairly good looking
It's beautiful.
lady. You mentioned about Buff Bagwell and Luger leaving at one point. Did they have backstage heat? Because you always hear that they were like kind of divas behind the scenes.
As I said, they got there and like immediately took off, and I don't know where they went, but when they got back, there was just like they're like basic. I don't know if it was yeah. Let me throw Dutch under the bus. I don't know. So it was like it's all fucked up now. So yeah, I don't know what happened, but that was the only time I remember Luger there. And as I said, Buff, I don't even think he was booked on the show. I think he was just Luger's driver for the day.
Can we hear the Dutch impression?
It's all fucked up. I don't.
Matthew wants to know if you were around during the point where they were thinking of bringing Randy Savage in.
I was around near that time. I just remember they were bringing me in backstage at that time. So Dusty had gotten the book and he was using me, and then they got rid of Dusty. I don't know if he went to Florida or what, but then it was Jeff Cornette and Russo, and they would basically bring me in so that Dixie saw me, and then Dixie would leave about halfway through the show, and then someone come and tap me. They're like, "Okay, Dixie's gone, you can leave," and I would never do anything. So, but I remember. At some point, Savage was there and much smaller than I would have imagined Savage to be. But I mean, he was just so far removed from wrestling. I think they just it's just one of those payday deals.
Right. As far as someone had a question about Jeff Probst, and I'm probably pronouncing his last name. Okay, you're pronouncing it right. Yeah. Is there still heat between you two? One of the fans wanted to know.
No, there was for years, but we're cool. Season 40 of Survivor was ended up being Winners at War at one time on paper. It was Rivals, and I was the first phone call. So whatever beef there was, it was squashed. However, my grandma did actually pass away 2 weeks ago, and I did not receive condolences from Jeff Probst.
What was the whole deal with the legal situation involving jewelry and your grandmother? And I'm sorry to hear she passed.
Oh, thank you. So I had a disgruntled relative that was kind of jealous of my fame and of my mom, and saw an opportunity to file paperwork in the county court system in an area near me. And without a phone call, investigation, or anything, I had felony larceny charges. And so I get a letter in the mail on a Friday, and they're just like, it's like, turn yourself in immediately, blah, blah, blah. And so I call them, and I'm just like, hey, like, is this like real? And they're like, oh yeah. And I was like, yeah, like, so like, is this some kind of joke? They're like, it's absolutely no joke. And I'm like, okay. I was like, well, it's Friday and I don't want to go there and not, and like, if like a magistrate or something's not there, be stuck there all weekend. So I'm going to wait till Monday to handle this. And they're like, well, if you get caught before then, it could be really bad. I'm like, all right, well, I don't really go out a lot, so I feel like I'm fine. So me and my mom, we went like on Monday afternoon, and we went, saw the magistrate, zero bond or whatever. And they released us, contacted a lawyer. And then when it was time for the actual court hearing, my grandmother was there with that relative. And before we even went before the judge or anything, the Commonwealth attorney pulled aside my grandmother and myself and that relative. And they're like, do you know why you're here? And she was like, yeah, somebody said something that, my grandma called me John. She's like, someone told me John and his mom took something, but like, they don't have to take, like, anything I have is, they can have. But I gave them that. Like, she had these bar stools that, she goes, hey, I heard you're remodeling your house and you have a bar. Would you like these bar stools? I'm like, no, they're old lady bar stools. And she was like, well, in the interim, until you get the bar stools that you want, how about you take these? And I'm like, no, I really don't want old lady bar stools. And she was like, well, look, she goes, if I get in these and try to get out, I will probably kill myself. So if you would do me the favor of potentially saving my life, will you take these bar stools? I'm like, yes. And then that necklace was something that was given to my mom like 5 years prior to that. So anyway, so the Commonwealth attorney asked my grandma, I was like, she was like, no, she goes, anything they want, I would have given them. And they're like, well, this disgruntled relative, which I won't acknowledge because they want that so bad and they'll never get it. I was like, this disgruntled relative says that filed paperwork on your behalf and said, and my grandmother looked over at that relative and said, that's ugly. That did not happen. And you're ugly. And at that moment, the Commonwealth attorney apologized to my grandmother, apologized to myself and my mom, not the disgruntled relative. And it was ruled null pros, which means no charge. It erased. We went back in time, it erased history, and it showed that no charges were ever filed in the first place.
Very interesting.
But the beauty of it is, I think I made about $20,000 in T-shirt sales with my mugshot.
Oh, there you go. Making the best of it. Is that your man cave, by the way? Where are you right now?
This is my studio where I handle the production for Reality After Show. As you see in the back, I have a Big Lebowski pinball machine back there. I have my beer cooler with a lot of the beers that I've brewed with my face on it over the years. And then I have a setup for I have over 2,000 vinyl records, and then we either record here in front of the television monitor for Wrestling After Show, or right here where how I'm doing it now.
Are you still in Virginia?
I'm in North Carolina. I'm on the Virginia-North Carolina border.
Okay.
Yeah.
You promoted your own wrestling company for a while, didn't you?
I did. So I started in '98 for New Dimension Wrestling, and I worked there for a while, and then I moved to Portland, Oregon, and I contacted Chris Plano, the owner of New Dimension Wrestling, and I was like, hey, I'm looking at running my own wrestling promotion in Portland. And Chris had spent a ton of money on this like computer generated graphics package for New Dimension Wrestling that he had just used as a pilot to shop around, and nothing ever happened of it. And I was just like, hey, can I use that intro package and call this New Dimension Wrestling West Coast? And it makes New Dimension sound bigger, and then I have a cool computer generated opening video package thing for my TV show. And he's like, absolutely. So I promoted New Dimension Wrestling in Portland, Oregon. I was running shows without the permission of the Oregon State Athletic Commission, and I just refused to let them in my shows. And as a result, they found the Oregon State Athletic Commission found it impossible to regulate, and as a result stopped regulating the wrestling business in Oregon. And as a result, you're welcome, WWE. You can go there without the commission breathing down your neck.
Yeah, I heard that because someone wanted me to wrestle there recently, and I've asked about a license because they were notorious for having a licensing office, but I could confirm they said they only do real combat sports now.
Yeah, so I ran a show at this theater it's called the Pierce Theater, and it was like an adult theater thing. It was very odd, and the owner of the theater is named he went by the name of Luscious Larry, and he had little short shorts and a lollipop and inline skates. And I was just like, hey, can I run a show here? He said, absolutely. I was like, well, the only problem is if the commission shows up, we could get in trouble. And he was like, it's not going to be a problem. And I was like, well, it can be. He's like, no, absolutely not. He's like, when he gets here, I'll handle it. And he's like, okay. So he's like, what does he look like? I'm like, he'll be the only guy coming, because this is Portland, Oregon. We had cool kids and the punkers and all that. So this guy stuck out like a sore thumb. I was like, if you see someone that looks like John Glenn, that's the commission. And so the commission shows up, and he was like, hey, I'm here to for the matches. And he goes, yeah, sorry. And he was like, what do you mean? He goes, you can't come in unless you have a ticket. He was like, well, no, I'm with the Oregon State Athletic Commission. He goes, I don't care. This is my venue. You have to have a ticket. And he was like, fine, I'll buy a ticket. He goes, we're sold out. and that was it. And it was after that it was deemed unenforceable.
Did you ever run into Billy Jack Haynes during your time in Portland?
I was at a auto show, and Billy Jack was walking around with a letter that it was I don't know, it was an envelope that said Mr. McMahon, that you could tell Billy Jack had written himself, and but he was telling people it was a letter from Vince McMahon asking him to wrestle Stone Cold at WrestleMania. And I don't remember the world begging for that match. And B, I'm pretty sure the letter would have been written to Billy Jack Haynes and not to Mr. McMahon on the outside of the envelope.
What are your thoughts on everything that happened with him? Because I knew him before all this, and yeah, he's very eccentric, clearly has a lot of mental health problems, but you don't necessarily think he's going to cross the line where he actually becomes a danger to society.
I just had that brief run in there. I know that there was a horse betting track called the Rialto that me and my friends would sometimes dip in to grab a cheap pint. But and supposedly like that was his hangout. I never saw him there. So my interaction with him was limited. I mean, we heard, there was always just crazy stories about Billy Jack, but like my Billy Jack fandom or whatever, I just remember this guy that was in WWE for a cup of coffee that had this huge back, and he wore green and yellow. So those tube socks that didn't go with anything finally matched something. And then just like that, he was gone.
Now, I know you were a partier, and I'm sure you knew some underworld people in Oregon. He claimed he was like a drug transporter for Barry Seal for the Oregon area for a
Yeah,
long
no,
time.
I later heard stories. I never went on a deep dive to kind of flush out what was, but I mean, the stories that were out there about Billy that I did hear, like, I mean, they were just, urban myths. So like it was, there could, I was always warned that if I, because I'm just like, hey, we're going to go to the Rialto and see Billy Jack. I was always warned Billy is dangerous and be careful. And of course, I was haphazard, but never ran into him. So I didn't get, where there's smoke, there's fire. If I had that many people and good friends, like Bruiser Bryan and Smart Bart Sawyer and those guys, if they're telling me be careful, he's dangerous, then they mean that be careful, he's dangerous.
What about Playboy Buddy Rose, another Oregon legend? Did he ever work for you for your company out there?
No, I wanted to. So when I started New Dimension Wrestling, there was a guy named Grant. I can't remember his last name, but Grant was working in the Pacific Northwest as Playboy Buddy Rose Jr. And so one of the storylines that myself, Jim Valley from Wrestling Observer, we were he was the play-by-play guy and I was the color commentator guy, and we were also running it, and we were the bookers. And so one of the storylines right out of the gate was going to be we were going to have Playboy Buddy Rose Jr. come out there, and he was a jobber. He lose, and he's just like, and we interview him, and it's just like, hey, tough match out there. He's just like, yeah, I'm just looking to put all the pieces together. It's kind of tough being a second generational wrestler, blah, blah, blah. And the gimmick was going to be that this guy loses and talks about his dad and all that. And then eventually, like taping number episode like 5 or 6 or 8, we wanted to establish Buddy Rose Jr. is a loser, and we were gonna and then episode 6, 7, whatever, Buddy Rose shows up and it's just like, that's not my kid. He was like, I'm sure your mom was a rat, but there's no way that you're my kid, and and distance himself. And then and Playboy Buddy Rose Jr. is like, I'm positive you're, because they look so, whatever. And it would be and there would be a fight for the name Playboy Buddy Rose, and we're going to make shirts. I'm Buddy Rose, and then the payoff was going to be we're going to bring in a third guy that also claimed he was Buddy Rose, and then Buddy Rose would accept that this was his son, and the two of them would fight for the honor of the Roses and get rid of this wannabe fake Buddy Rose. So we had written all that out. And I guess word travels fast in the wrestling, was it tell a phone, tell a friend, tell a wrestler, whatever. So like within seconds of the concept from mental idea to on paper, we get a phone call from Buddy Rose. He goes, "Hey, Jonny Fairplay." He goes, "I hear you running shows." I'm like, "Oh my God, Buddy Rose, I love you. You're like the Blow Away Diet's the greatest thing." And, and I had watched, I'd grown up, just any wrestling I could watch, I would digest, the AWA World Class, every, tapes from Portland, all that stuff. So I had seen a lot of, the Doug Summers and Playboy Buddy Rose against the Midnight Rockers and AWA, just the bloodbath. And I had seen, a lot of stuff he had done in Portland, with Roddy and all those guys. And I loved Buddy Rose and all the stories I've heard, just one of the greatest minds. I mean, the guy just mentally just, knew the business so incredibly well. And so I told him the idea. He goes, "I love it." He goes, I can be there. I can be there on the first night. And I was like, he goes, I'll be there. I can do it for $500. And I was like, wow, thank you. I did not know. I was, looking to reach out to you, and thank you for the $500 price. I was like, but I don't need you till episode 8, whatever it was. Let's just say for argument's sake, episode 8. I was like, I don't need you till episode 8. So when it gets closer to episode 8, I'll reach out, check your availability. Love to have you. I think this storyline could be a lot of fun. And he was like, okay, are you sure you can? Because I can be there that first. I was just like, yeah. I was like, no. We want to establish this guy. It doesn't make sense to have you there early. And he was like, all right. So he hangs up. He calls back and he goes, I can do $250. And I was like, wow, well, thank you. I appreciate the price reduction. I was like, but once again, it wasn't a matter of price, even though $500 was probably out of my budget at the time. I was like, it just timing wise, like we just really want to establish the character played by Buddy Rose Jr. and that he's a loser, and there may not be any affiliation with you. Like we want the fan to be like, is this guy really his son? So we want to tell the story with Buddy Rose Jr. first, and he was like, okay, I get it. So then he calls me back, he goes, $100, I could be there. And I was like, buddy, it's not the money. So, and I think it ended with him telling me to go fuck myself. It's just like, apparently you don't want to use me. I'm like, I do on episode 8.
Yeah, that's typical of some of the old school wrestlers.
Yeah, and I get where he was coming from, but as I said, if we were just running, just one-off shows, and we weren't making, like, this was television, and we had a deal with the local cable access network. We had a deal with the facility, Nelson's Nautilus, whatever. We had everything, budgeted out, timed out. We were doing it as close to professional as we could at that time with the budget that we had, with the people that we had. And we just wanted things to make sense. And as I said, I don't think it makes sense for this character of Buddy Rose Jr., who, as I said, as viewers, we're not supposed to know if this guy is remotely aligned with Buddy Rose whatsoever. If Buddy Rose is there, the fans can just walk over to Buddy Rose at the merch table and be like, hey, is that your kid?
It would have been fun to say you partied with Buddy Rose one night, though, with his reputation.
Oh God, yeah. Well, I mean, I would have loved to have just gone to. I should have figured out a way to make everyone happy. I don't know how without waiting till episode 8. But yeah, I wish I'd just gone over to Buddy's house, because the rumor and innuendo is he had all the master tapes of Portland wrestling, like till the day he died. So, and that's a treasure trove of content that I think for like in its entirety is missing as something that's actually out there.
And you probably could have got it for $50 at that time.
At the end of the evening, not at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I heard something funny the other day. There's always been the rumor that Roddy Piper liked young boys, and somebody wrote in the comments, "Oh, that's how Jonny Fairplay got in with Piper. He was a young blonde kid." Could you address that rumor?
I never saw Roddy with a younger male. There was he always had weird assistants. Like Smart Bart Sawyer was a friend of mine, and we discussed it. Nothing ever happened with them that that he told me or that I believe. Roddy never tried anything with me at the time. Roddy, of course, was married. I was in a relationship and very happy in my relationship, and very heterosexual. I never saw that. I think Roddy, I think the perception of Roddy was he was strange and alone. Roddy had trust issues with people in general. And so Roddy would have an assistant, to carry a shit for him or to do like Roddy loved the illusion of being more important than anyone else. He loved the he loved that if it's just like, hey, can you talk to, and Roddy's like, oh, I'll send my assistant to talk to you. He loved that power structure of he's in control and you're not. And and it's kind of like one of those Dixie Carter deals. It's just like, oh, I bet she's with the boys. You want that to be true. I think with Roddy just had, he had an assistant to do, and they're just like, oh, well, the assistant must be there to be doing this. Roddy had plenty of shit for you to do as an assistant that did not include sex. I mean, we were going to act like we're going to acting class like 3 nights a week. We were running lines for acting class, every single day. We were meeting with producers, writers, preachers, investors, all these people to do these at the time straight to DVD movies. He was doing XPW. Like Roddy was still doing, like, if that phone rang, Roddy was like, where is money on the other end of this, and how much is it, and how much more can I make it? And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. Like, Roddy Piper wasn't The Rock, but Roddy Piper was as close to The Rock in terms of all the potential money things he could do versus, say, Elias.
Yeah. As far as what it was like being around him, first of all, how did you get into contact with him, and what's just like a typical day as his assistant? I know it involved a lot of drugs, but like, is it like
it was okay? Well, I feel like that's kind of blown out of proportion. All right, so I was putting Smart Bart Sawyer was his personal assistant, and Smart Bart Sawyer was living in Portland, Oregon. Roddy was living in Portland, and Smart Bart was good staying in Portland, Oregon. I had moved to Los Angeles. Bart reached out and he was just like, hey, Piper's planning on doing some movies. He's going to be moving to Burbank. He's looking for an assistant. Would you like to meet with him? And it's basically the only person that Bart knew in Los Angeles. So that was my qualifications and how I got the gig. So we met. As far as Roddy, every day, as I said, we're going to acting class like 3 days a week. When you're not going to acting class, they give you sides, to learn for the next time you're there. So we're constantly just running lines there. He was getting plenty of offers to straight to DVD movies. So we're meeting with his agent like 2-3 times a week. We're meeting with the writers. We're meeting with the director. We're meeting with the money guys, because Roddy was in a unique position in which, sorry sorry, folks, he was not Scottish. He was from Canada. So if you at that time, if you put Roddy in your movie and made him a producer, executive producer, whatever, just gave him a producer credit, you would Canada would give you tax credits towards production of the movie. So it was advantageous to cast Roddy in your movie there. So it was the late 90s. We were in Hollywood. I mean, mostly we were just smoking a few joints throughout the day. So was there cocaine back then? Yes, but it wasn't like early episodes of Scarface, or Scarface movie, or early episodes of Miami Vice. It was just like that was like the thing back then.
Did he wear the skirt while he did the cocaine?
Well, as a kilt. If you call it a skirt, you get kilt. And no, Roddy only he had the kilt. He would bring it. When we did XPW, he brought it then. And the leather jacket that you see Ronda Rousey in, he would wear that jacket, pretty much daily. It's the people that I was doing that was in Hollywood with at the time. And as I said, back in the late 90s, cocaine was a very recreational thing, and it wasn't it wasn't crazy back then. Fast forward 25 years now. I mean, half of my life difference or whatever. Like we all talk, it's just like, holy, like, can you believe that it like now I don't know anyone that does cocaine, sells cocaine, or would want to try cocaine. Because like I look back, I'll see on, Facebook and stuff, it's just like, that person died from fentanyl, like, 6 years ago or whatever. Like, it's just like, why would you, like, it's not even on the menu. So,
and that's probably for the best, because I'm not judging anyone here.
Yeah.
But like, what would be the difference?
Like as I said, we were celebrities in Hollywood, and that was a thing in Hollywood. So, and I've heard people reach out, like, from the Piper camp or whatever, and they're just like, I can't believe that you went on this podcast and said that. And it wasn't, to expose Roddy. It wasn't to sound cool or be cool. It wasn't to I wasn't here to sensationalize it in any way. It's something that Roddy discussed in interviews, so I didn't feel it was out of school. It was something that he has brought up in the past, and it was the past. So I mean, like, the stories that I told of, very little, just like that was kind of the thing, recreational to a limited degree in the late 90s. The stories Roddy would tell of Studio 54, like those are the stuff that the stories of which legends are made, with Andy Warhol and all, and all these people doing copious amounts in the 80s.
Yeah, and if you don't mind sharing, I'm just curious, what would have been the most you ever did in a period without sleeping? Not necessarily with him, but just with you, because it can definitely be something that you're just going to want to keep doing.
I mean, I don't ever remember getting more than an 8 ball back in the day, but like, that was like I've saved more times more times than not. Like, someone would just have like a gram, and and you share that amongst several people, and then if it's an 8 ball, which I guess is 3.5 grams, you share with more people. So at that time, the end game was to come home, like there would be 10 people hanging out, listening to music, drinking vodka Red Bulls, and and doing a line. So, but as I said, it was a very different time and very different set of circumstances. But yeah, no, I was never privy to, invited to, or saw Roddy at, a quote unquote Scarface party ever.
And he could handle, I guess, his partying pretty well, because you always hear that story of Ric Flair. I don't know if Roddy ever told you this, but maybe you do know the other side of it, where that night that Ric Flair set up a big thing at his house, and Mark Lewin, who was also known as the crazy partier, and Roddy had that face off, and Roddy outlasted Lewin, and Roddy was way smaller than Lewin. So that was pretty impressive.
I never heard that story. So no,
Yeah.
the made like Roddy. I mean, he always called Rick Rickus. He's like, oh, let's call Rickus. Yeah, no, he just the stories I heard, that he just loved him as a brother and friend. So no, the party stories were all like the majority that was the Studio 54 stuff, because Roddy kind of transcended wrestling during the whole rock and wrestling thing, the evolution of WrestleMania as an entity, and like the Dave Wolf, Cyndi Lauper's husband and manager, he wanted to be in the wrestling. He loved wrestling, and so he wanted to kind of get in and be a part of it. And they would hang out at 54, Cindy and Dave and Roddy. And she loved Roddy Piper. Like, that was her favorite wrestling person, was Roddy Piper. She was not a fan of Hulk Hogan, and that's who they aligned her with. But yeah, Roddy loved Cindy as like like a little sister. And but that was the whole, like, these were like your Andy Warhols and Cindy Lauper, and these people. These were just these larger than life, almost cartoon people in the world of pop culture at Studio 54, which was like the coolest dance club in which drugs was a thing. So, but they were just all there, and that was just a component of it.
Out of all the celebrities you've partied with, who would you say is the most famous celebrity you used to hang out with at your peak?
Like a one-off or on a regular basis.
Maybe both. I think the fans will want to know both.
On a one-off, Tom Ford, he used to be the designer for Gucci, and then he started his own thing. Tom Ford received the Rodeo Walk of Style, and a star on the Rodeo Walk of Style. And I was invited to that, and it was a black tie, black coat only. And I'd had one of my custom tailored suits. It was like a sand color and a white shirt and red tie. And so I arrived, no shown buttons. It's really, really slick deal. And I got there, and Tom Ford was like, "I love the suit. Who's the designer?" I was like, "Me." And he was just like, "I love it." And and then Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore, they arrived shortly thereafter, and he was wearing a tan suit and red tie. And I was like, "Hey, you got the memo?" He's like, "Yeah, fuck, I'm not wearing a black." And I was like, "Yeah, buck the system." So anyway, so we were all hanging out that night. I was with the West Coast bureau chief of Star Magazine at that time, and Tom Hanks bumped into me, and he's like, "Hey, I know you," and I'm like, "I know you." I'm like, "Bosom Buddies. That's one of my favorite shows. Are you still working, or did anything ever come from that?" And he goes, "That's why they voted you out." So that was my favorite celebrity story, and I think the most. I don't think there's many bigger than Tom Hanks.
No, definitely not. Although I can't. What's he been in lately? And I'm
Uh,
not saying that in a bad way. I just can't think of anything.
I don't know. I think there's a new Toy Story coming out.
Okay.
I don't. I mean, I would imagine that's going to make some money. The last
Yeah.
few
Oh, yeah.
that basically paid for any size mansion that you need, I guess. So as far as celebrities just on a regular basis, I mean, we used to run into the same people, like Monday nights was the Viper Room, and Steel Panther would perform there, and I used to see the Miz, most Monday nights there. And Tuesday nights was the Standard, and you would always see Vince Vaughn there every Tuesday night, and Jack Osborne and Kelly Osborne were always there. I remember my first night in Los Angeles, first night at a cool, quote unquote, cool club. Michael Stipe was there, and I was like, "Holy shit!" And he said hello, and so I'm trying to think. The big Thursday night place was Hollywood Canteen, and inside this club was an old like Airstream, metal Airstream deal, and they had a hookah pipe in the back, with the pipes coming off of it or whatever. And I remember like most nights it would be like the lead singer of the Cottonmouth Kings, Vin Diesel, Heather Graham. I would usually see them on Thursday nights. Lucy Liu. What I mean, you would see certain places. It was like Joseph's was hot for a while. It was always Leonardo DiCaprio, Ashton Kutcher, Wilbur Valderrama, and Danny Masterson. So every place had places that these celebrities would go to, so they couldn't get bothered. Paris Hilton, she I'd always see her at National.
Is she one of your 1,000?
She was not. She was not one of my 1,000. So no. Towards the end, I spent a lot of time. I would go to like the Rainbow Room late night. Like I would meet up with X-Pac, and Be Real would always be there, and just had just the most amazing buds you've ever seen in your life.
Did you witness anything, and I'm sure you have, back in those days, which is like the early 2000s, before everyone had camera phones, that if it had happened in this era, it would have been major news, but because it happened before this era, nobody knew about it really?
Yeah, I mean, that was the 2001, I guess, is when I first moved to Los Angeles. And then my first season of Survivor was 2003, and it was like the #1 show in the world. And so that, things escalated quickly. So, no, I remember in 2004, Steve-O had moved to Los Angeles, and he had called me up, and he was just like, "Hey, come over. I just got a new apartment right down the street from you." So I go to Steve-O's place, and it's just empty. There's nothing in there. And he's like, "Open the fridge." I open the fridge, and it's filled with Pabst Blue Ribbon cans. He's like, "Yeah." He goes, I could have either got a couch or filled it with Pabst. And I was like, "All right, well, I would have liked to have sat down, but I guess I'll enjoy a Pabst." And so Steve-O, wherever he had just left Jackass at this time. And so wherever Steve-O would go, he would bring a guy with a camera with him. So he was constantly filming stuff. And I remember, so this was about 2004 or 5. I want to say 2004. And back then on Sunset, they still had the prostitutes, walking the strip back then. And Steve-O would walk up to, I'd gone out one night with Steve-O and his camera guy, and he was walking up to escorts, and he was offering them $100 to come back to his apartment, do a handstand, and try to poop. And if they tried it, he would give them $100. And if they succeeded, he would give them $200 or $250. And we had only made the first escort that we went to. She yells for her pimp, who runs out with a gun. We start running, and 2 shots fire off. And I'm like, "All right, well, this was great." And he was like, "It's fine. We got it on camera." And I was like, "Wonderful."
Do you know if he ever managed to get someone to actually pull that off successfully?
I think that was the beginning of the end of the requests. I feel it was not welcomed. I think
with enough laxatives, it could be done, but that would be really messy.
Yeah. I didn't see the benefit either way with it. So yeah. So, but yeah, it was an ingenious idea. Like, it's one of those deals where you literally throw enough shit against the wall, something's got to stick. I feel like that one didn't stick.
Now, I know you went out with the one girl from America's Next Top Model. I think you had a kid with her. I don't remember her name. Is there any other celebrities that you've dated over the years you could share with us?
Ooh, define date.
Well, anything from go out and not finish the job with to just having the job with, but you don't necessarily have to say the specifics.
Yeah.
But,
no, I mean, I went out with like, reality stars were kind of my sweet spot. So, because that's, I guess, my home. Mary Carey, the porn star that ran for governor. So we used to hang out a lot. We were very friendly. I never dated, but we hung out a lot, and I consider her a really close friend at the time. I love China. China was just such a sweetheart, and one of the most like compassionate people that I've ever like. I mean, just like the exact opposite of that character that you saw on television.
What could you tell us about China? Other than that, like any specific stories you could share?
Yeah, I mean, it sucked because towards the end, before she went away to Japan, and I'm so happy that she did go away to Japan, because she was we stayed in communication once once she went there, and she was teaching English to Japanese kids, and she was doing so great, and she was clean, and she was amazing. And but prior to her leaving to go there, and then she came back and got involved with the wrong people again. But prior to her going to Japan, I remember like I would go over to her apartment, and there would just be these zombies there at her fucking apartment. I mean, just fucking scumbags that were just there to take whatever drugs that she would accidentally drop, or or when she would leave the room for them to steal or whatever. Like, it was so it was just so painful, because I'm just like, just get these fucking people out of your fucking apartment. So yeah, and like, and in those days, like, she would call me like, like around 2 o'clock. She's like, "Hey Johnny, come over, let's hang out." And I'd go over, and it'd be China, and you'd be so happy. And then she had this little pill box, and she's like, one for me, and not all for anyone else, and then fast forward however many hours, and it's just like, oh, like, you don't need this. Like she was just such a magical person, and it would just be so frustrating. And then she's like, China needs to go home, and then those fucking zombies were still in her apartment while she was gone, because if they hadn't taken everything that they could have stolen while she was gone, or probably too drugged out to move to take it, they would be there, and they're like, "We got her from here," and I'm like, "Unfortunately, you do." So yeah, that it would just break your heart.
How would you describe yourself to Charles asking who you are?
Ask your mom.
Matthew wants to know, is there any truth that David Arquette was going to be used in 2007 in TNA, and he wanted you as as his manager?
Me and David have a very close mutual friend, Sugar, from Survivor. They're close. I have never met David Arquette. I am not aware that to what knowledge he has of me, but he never reached out. TNA never reached out, and to say that I wasn't interested in doing something in 2007, I can't say no. I wasn't asked, so like maybe I would have said no. I don't know, like, but yeah, the offer was never extended. I'm trying to think, because I had communication. Actually, 2007. No, I was definitely interested.
Charles thanks you for telling you who he was. For telling you who he was.
Sure.
By the way, that's funny.
Sure. So no, 2007. Like, I was still talking with Dixie on a pretty semi-regular basis. Like she would pitch me to the committee, and they're just like, "Oh no, that won't work." Blah blah blah. So I remember she would throw my name out there, ask them for ideas, and they wouldn't have ideas. So then she would contact me and say, "Hey, do you have an idea?" And I remember the last idea I pitched was that I would be Dixie's assistant, and I would sponsor my Loudmouth Golf, and I would wear my crazy suits. And so she asked me if I could type all that up and present it. So I typed it all up and presented it, and I mentioned my sponsor and everything else. And fast forward, 3 weeks, and or maybe 5, I don't know. It was pretty soon afterwards, and Rockstar Spud is Dixie's assistant, wearing literally loudmouth golf suits because they had contacted them and said, "Can you guys, like, we heard you give suits to Jonny Fairplay. Can you give us suits?"
Well, there's no doubt you would have done a way better job than Rockstar Spud.
Well, for the record, I had heat with Spud for a while just because it's kind of frustrating, to have an idea like that and throw it out there. I thought Rockstar Spud was amazing at that role.
I don't even remember him. All I remember is that he's really small. So that's all I could tell you. I wasn't watching TNA at that point.
I think that is a great trait for a manager. That's why, in the grand scheme of things, could I have been the greatest cruiserweight wrestler of all time? Potentially. Who's to say? However, I felt I was best used as a manager because I feel I can accentuate the size of whoever I am managing and be the voice of that character that may not have the skills that I potentially bring to the table.
Last question here. It's a quick one. Any wrestler ever threatened to beat you up?
Yeah, Chris Jericho.
Chris Jericho, legit.
Yeah.
Could you share that?
On the podcast, but he lied. He had Joel McHale on, and so we were. It was after WCW Monday Nitro, maybe. And it was Mikey Whipwreck early on the show. I don't know if it was Starrcade or Nitro. It was one of those. And after the show, it was in DC or Baltimore, whatever. After the show, we were all at the BWI Marriott, and Mikey Whipwreck had just left ECW, and he was talking to me and my buddy. He was like, "Hey, what'd you think of the match?" I was like, "Well, considering you're working with one of the the worst workers, Van Hammer, I thought you did pretty good." And Mikey was like looking for validation from the boys or something, and so Mikey went and told Jericho, he's like, "Yeah, there's a couple of marks saying that Van Hammer is the worst worker, blah blah blah." And I get it now. And I've spoken with both Jericho and Mikey Whipwreck, and Mikey is like, he goes, "Hey, you remember that night?" I'm like, "Yeah, you fucking ratted me out to jail." He's like, "Oh, I know." He's like, "Dude, so me and Mikey are cool. Me and Jericho are cool, but And being on the other side of the bit, hearing two fucking, fans / marks talk shit is like, go fuck yourself. I get it. So, but and who am I to rate a guy on how good he is in the ring or not? Whatever. I don't care. So, but Jericho, he came up to me, and he was wearing jean shorts and a fanny pack and one of his stupid shirts or whatever. And I believe at the time I was dressed up pretty well, comparably speaking. And he was just like, "Who do you think you are talking about the boys? You're not one of the boys. You're not allowed." And I'm just like, "Well, I'm kind of allowed to have an opinion. I feel like we all are, but whatever." So I'm making fun of his jorts and whatever. And so we're in each other's face, and he's about to fucking clock me and fucking kill me. And he could have. Let's not get it twisted whatsoever. But Disco Inferno and Booker T grabbed me, picked me up over their heads, and carried me out to save my life. And I'm still friends with Disco, and whenever I see Booker T, we laugh about it and stuff. So, but nothing happened. But he had Chris had Joel McHale on his podcast, and he was just like, they were talking about House of Villains that Joel McHale is the host of, and he was like, "Yeah, Jonny Fairplay," and Chris was like, "Yeah, I remember one time after this wrestling show, he was there and he was popping off, and I punched him in the face," and I was just like, "Whoa, okay, can I sue you for assault?" So no, I'm not. But no, he did not punch me. Everyone affectionately remembers Disco and Booker carrying me over their heads out of there. There was no punches. And fast forward, Chris had left WCW and had gone to WWE, and I saw him. It was just at a club. It wasn't the I don't think it was the BWI. It was just a club in Baltimore. We just happened to run into one another, and I saw him, and I had since done Survivor. And I bought him. I was just like, "Hey, can I get you a beer?" And I think he was like, "No, let me get." And we laughed about it. So because it was I was an asshole, and I apologized. And he was just like, "Well, threatening to beat you up wasn't cool on my part either. So, but no, that story has just grown little legs and become something so much different than than what it initially started as.
Van Hammer Halloween Havoc 89 is one of the worst matches ever. I don't even remember who it was against, but people can look that up if they question what you said there.
Yeah, when as I said, I get, it's just like, who the fuck are you? But at the same time, we as fans are allowed to have an opinion of who we think is good and not good.
100%. And I think the last I heard about Van Hammer, he ran over about a 4 or 7-year-old girl while drunk. So he's not exactly the nicest person either.
Holy
But yeah, you can look that up. He's been off the radar. She was on a bicycle.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm not laughing at that. I'm just laughing that that's just another sad wrestler story.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah. The cool thing is we're getting a lot less sad wrestler stories these days, and I'm happy to see that.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. Where can people follow you?
So I have a podcast, the Reality After Show, in which we cover Survivor, The Traitors, Dealer and Deal Island, Australian Survivor, you name it, Squid Game, all the cool reality stuff we cover. It's at youtube.com/aftershow. I also, we're talking wrestling. Me and my buddy Heath, we do a wrestling podcast. It's the Wrestling After Show. We usually record on Tuesdays. However, I am en route to early tomorrow morning. I am off to Norwalk, Connecticut. I will be hosting a Survivor viewing party with Richard Hatch, the winner of season 1 of Survivor. We'll be in Norwalk, Connecticut. Go to besttriviaever.com to get tickets for that. That's this Wednesday night. I leave tomorrow, so make sure I'm there. But Wednesday night, the premiere of Survivor season 48, besttriviaever.com. Go to JonnyFairplay.com, no H in Johnny. That's JonnyFairplay, JonnyFairplay.com for links to everything. Get yourself a cameo. Get yourself. I got some wrestling stuff on there available through my eBay deal. And then if you want to listen to any of my podcasts, search Reality After Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you pod. But realityaftershow.com, youtube.com/aftershow, johnnyfairplay.com, all those things. If you're in Australia, I will be there March 16th and 17th for Australian Survivor viewing parties. Tickets available at survivortix.com. That's survivortix.com. And wrestling, because that's what we're here to discuss. March 9th, I will be in Boca Raton Wrestling. It is me versus Neil the Heel with special guest referee Frank the Clown. Go to BocaRatonWrestling.com for your tickets. It is 2 of the greatest heels of all time. That's right, I said it, folks. I can talk about myself and say I'm great, because if I don't, no one else will.
Very good. And Charles, thanks for sticking around to the end. No, Johnny doesn't have a GoFundMe, and
or an OnlyFans. Shocking.
Or an OnlyFans. You don't have an OnlyFans?
I do not. I have a Patreon, realitypatreon.com. There we go.
There you go. Thanks for giving us that. And shut this down with whatever you want to tell the fans.
Thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure. Hannibal, you rule. I like sharing the stories. I feel I'm one of the most misunderstood professional wrestler celebrity crossover people in the history of the biz. I think if you actually listened for a minute, you would see my desire and love for the great sport that is professional wrestling. And and for those that were there, that have revisionist history and that see things a different way, you're wrong.